Hey, Matrix Live, it's Demos Week. Demos Week is 1 week a month where we go around the company, Element Company, and find out what interesting things have been going on. And I've got a bunch of interesting things. We've got Kegan, who's going to talk about Complement. Complement is a integration testing for servers, getting very important. Now there are so many competing implementations out there.
Complementary.
It's complementary
implementation.
I'll let him do the puns. Steve from iOS is going to talk about the Touch ID / Face ID features now available in Element iOS. Bruno, who we actually saw last week, is going to talk about his progress with E2E and hydrogen, and I think that might even be done, although I'll let him find out. And then Christian from the Bridges team is going to talk about easy bridge creation with matrix-appservice-bridge, which we'll find out what that means. I'm going to hand over to Kegan.
Hello. 1 second. I'm going to have to kill this. I was just trying to do something sneaky, but it's fine. Let me share my screen.
I can only see a big throbbing K.
What about now?
Oh, now it's got a K for complement.
Okay, so you see the slides.
We do.
Wonderful, good, cool. So let's talk a bit about Complement. So Complement is something that I've been working on, like on evenings and weekends, because I feel it's important for Matrix, and it's now kind of at the point where I feel like people should be working on it just in general as something that's kind of fun to play with, as well as important for the ecosystem, which I'll get into. But basically, the very, very brief version is it's a replacement for SciTest, if you know what SciTest is. If you don't, then we're going to go from first principles and talk about it. So basically, Complement is a way that you can test home servers. And you might kind of think, well, that's great. People write code, they write unit tests all the time. Why is this any different? And it's different in a few ways. It's because it's an integration testing suite. So it treats the home server as a black box. And this is really quite nice because it means that it could be testing different home servers. It could be testing Synapse, it could be testing Dendrite, it could be testing Conduit, it could be testing something entirely different. And it's super important that all these home servers are speaking the same language, so to speak, because if they aren't, then you could get into a position where clients, mobile clients or web clients, work with some home servers, but they don't work with other home servers. And also, likewise, in a similar vein, testing home servers is kind of important because you will always be, the code is a lot better at kind of stating the truth than what writing words is. Like words in general are quite difficult to kind of adequately explain all the edge cases. But if you're writing code, then you have to check. You have assertions to do that for you. So that makes things a bit nicer. So you tend to find. So for example, in SciTest currently, we actually have some bits that SciTest checks, which are actually the spec is quite quiet on. So those kinds of things are quite useful as well to make sure that in those cases that the home servers agree as well. And to me, it's one of the most important parts of the ecosystem because of this risk of fragmentation if it's not done correctly. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can test if you are doing this. You can obviously test the client server API. So you're testing things like /sync or creating rooms or joining rooms, sending messages, that kind of stuff. You can also test federation, server to server stuff. In that scenario, you're testing like 2 Dendrite instances or 2 Synapse instances. But the third one's an important one, distinguishing factor, is that you're testing federation to the test framework itself. And that test framework is ideally implementing what the specification says, because otherwise you could get into scenarios whereby two Dendrites could be talking to each other, but they're not talking the spec. They're talking some custom language, right? Some custom protocol that is nothing to do with the federation specification at all. So that's the point of that third one, is to make sure that it's doing what the spec says it should be doing. Yeah, so this is what I've kind of touched on, is that like we already have a thing which does this, right? And we have a thing that's called SciTest, and SciTest is fine. SciTest has been very useful for Dendrite development because we've been able to push forward very, very quickly, because we have a whole bunch of tests which are failing. And it's also a black box integration testing suite. So it means that we can just, instead of testing on Synapse, which is hence the name SciTest, we're using it to test on Dendrite, and it's worked really, really well. But we've had issues with SciTest. We know that we have issues with SciTest, and some of them are just very difficult to fix. Very difficult to just kind of make a pull request and kind of fix it all, because SciTest is also quite large at this point. There's over 900 tests or so, so it's a chunky piece of work, but equally just hasn't really had a lot of love. So in comparison, Complement is a kind of grounds up rewrite of how, at least how I would do an integration testing suite for home servers today. It heavily relies on Docker. So I'm not going to explain what Docker is, but it heavily relies on Docker to provide that ability to just, you spin up a home server. It doesn't really care what that home server is, so long as you have a Docker file and you can listen on a port, then that's good enough for it, kind of thing. And overall, it's written in Go, and we're building off of some of the underlying Go libraries that we use for Dendrite. That's partly because, remember that that third point I mentioned before, if I can just quickly, this test framework thing, that is actually implementing a federation server, right? It's that home server is going to be making federation requests to the test framework. So it's really important that that federation framework is actually works and isn't buggy in any way, and it's a lot easier to use something which we've tested and we know is actually pretty good. So if we were using like Synapse's federation bits or Dendrite's federation bits, that would be really good. So that's one of the reasons why also doing this in Go is quite useful. So I think that's enough. I don't know, a little bit more on basis how it works, and then I will show some stuff. So in terms of how it works, it uses Docker, and it spins up a new Docker container per test or suite of tests. So that basically means you have each test can have its own little isolated environment, and you can have multiple home servers there all talking to each other. And then when that test is done, everything just gets destroyed and put in the bin. And that's really, really nice. That's not something which SciTest does now. So if you were, sending requests really, really quickly in a previous SciTest, then that next SciTest, there could be issues with it hitting rate limiting. So you might have to disable rate limiting, or things like log pollution is a really big problem in SciTest, whereby, at the end of the SciTest, if something fails, you just have like a 35 meg log file to have to search through and find exactly what you're trying to, exactly which tests failed and then which logs are relevant. Whereas if they're done in a completely isolated environment, you actually only have a couple of lines from when those specific operations were made. So it means it's a lot easier to identify on the server side, like the actual errors that are present for when the tests fail, which is quite important, as it turns out. And the final other thing which Complement does is it has this idea of blueprints. The idea is that you might want to configure a home server in a particular way. So you might want to have like a federated one-to-one room, and you don't want to have to be writing the code constantly to go and spin up two servers, have them federate, have one person create a room and then join the room and send a message and do all that. So it's a lot easier if you can kind of say, just give me an image which is ready, kind of got all this set up. And that's the idea behind blueprints. So blueprints, they are just pure data structures, and they allow you to configure your home server into a particular state that you want, and then those tests can just pick a state that they want to use. So I think, for example, here we go. So you can see in this little very small bit of code here, you can see that you're deploying an Alice blueprint Alice, which is basically just a single person home server. So it's just got an Alice user, and that's it. So you don't need to call register and create an account and all that stuff. It's already been done for you. And that kind of level of reuse is actually really, really useful as well, because it means that there's not so much boilerplate that you have to write. I think, finally, demos. Are you all still with me?
What?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. Excellent. Wonderful. because it's very eerily when I'm just talking and there's nothing going on. That's not what I want to show. I want to show this. Okay, so in the Dendrite repo, there is a complement script, which I'm going to run. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to actually go and run complement. So what that does is it's going to go and build Dendrite in my current working directory. So with all my files modified and stuff. So hopefully the test will pass, but it will go and just run it on my local checkout. It will fetch the master branch of complement, and then it will run the tests. So there are basically a few ways that you can run complement. One of them is this way. You can see that all these steps of are using the Docker cache, because I've already actually run this before. So it doesn't actually re-download dependencies because we're using Docker caches intelligently, which is useful. So whilst that, in fact, I don't really want to, I'm just going to leave that running, and then I can briefly show this. So I've also hooked it up to BuildKite. So on here, you can see there's one called complement, which if I go into details, you can be like, ooh, complement, green tick. And then you've got some of the tests here. And these are all just the standard kind of Go test formatting. There's nothing special we're doing there. There is a JSON output that you can turn on. So we could probably make these, and then we can pass it through a processor to make it look a bit nicer. But in general, we're just using the default for now. And yeah, it seems good enough. It's got times and it's got some useful, well, not that useful, but it's got some interesting output. Let's wait for it to build. So you can run it in BuildKite, you can run it in the terminal using a local checkout, and you can also run it in the IDE, which is really, really cool. So when this hopefully finishes, so the few things, there are a few conditions you need your Docker file to have. You need to make sure you have some keys already, which is what that was doing. And then that's downloading complement. And if I just talk a little bit more, hopefully this will actually run and pass. So you can see lots of output because I've added on the verbose flag. So by usually there wouldn't be quite so much output, unless tests fail, obviously, then in which case I'll give you lots of stuff. And like, yeah, this is basically complement. So hopefully this will finish in 10 seconds or so, and then I can briefly show running it in an IDE, and then I think that's about it, roughly. There you go. So 33 seconds. Obviously, you have the build time there as well, and you can run a lot of this stuff in parallel as well. So we actually have an ability to do this. Nope. Hopefully this will work. Okay, cool. So this is opening the Docker, opening complement just in VS Code, and if I just click on this one maybe, and then I do run test, hopefully this will actually run. So this is actually just literally executing go test. There you go, and it says complete. So just to prove that that does in fact work, hopefully if I do that and change that and then rerun that, it will actually fail, because I think I put a timeout by default on sync timelines. So and then you should see some useful output as well, because that was one of the things I wanted to kind of be really strict on, is having useful output in the cases of failure. So you can see this has failed, and you can see that it's called the check function 5 times, and the sync until it's timed out. These are the actual logs from the Docker container. So these are actually from Dendrite. There's nothing particularly useful there, but basically it's not showing. I think you need to add in a bit more logging for this for it to be useful. But the idea is that it would actually, if you add on the complement debug flag, it will actually tell you what it called the check function with, which events it's called it with, and which ones return true or false. So that's kind of useful to have when you're debugging tests. These are things which you have to manually add inside tests with the whole log if fail stuff. So that's kind of baked into the way that a lot of these syncing things work now, and a lot of the HTTP client server API functions. But yeah, so you can run it locally in a terminal, in BuildKite, and in an IDE. And then finally, I will just finish up with one last slide, which is the future, which what I would like to do. So I would like to replace PsyTest with it. But it's, as I said before, PsyTest is a really big thing. So we're only a little bit of the way there. And I would love to test things like multiple home server implementations actually talking to each other. We don't do that at all currently in Cytest, but this is super, super easy to do in Complement, because as we know, they're all these Docker files, these base Docker files. And then once you've got them, you can kind of mix and match whichever way you want. And then finally, I'd like to kind of build, get people interested in it and get people excited about it, because ultimately this is kind of the glue that holds together all the home server implementations and therefore all the clients, and make sure that everything can talk to one another is literally these kinds of test suites. So I think giving a bit more love towards them to make sure that they can actually do, make sure that everything can interoperate is very important. And that's it.
Yeah, let's hear it for test suites. Yeah, no, I'm all for it. Have you had any input from the community on that front?
I've been primarily showing this to people, in Element, so not so much at the moment. Okay. But obviously, this is the first time that people will have actually seen lots and lots of stuff about Complement. I've obviously been talking a bit about it in the Dendrite channels and in the Home Server Devs channel, but not so much to just the wider Matrix ecosystem.
All right, cool. I think we can get some more feedback. Thank you, Kegan.
Thank you.
Stev from iOS, are you available? It's late where you are.
Yes. I'm available. Hey. Hello. I will just take time to share my screen. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So yes, I will present you the new local protection we introduced on Element iOS. So the demo will be quick. So now if you go to settings in the security section, you can find two new options. Now we can enable PIN code protection and also Face ID or Touch ID protection. And yes, you can enable both of them if you want. So I will start to do it. Yes, I'm authorizing. And I will also enable PIN code in this way. So now when you when you quit the app, you will see that we propose you the Face ID protection. And if, for example, you have your mask on your face and you are not able to unlock the device, you can also use the PIN code in this way, if you enable both of them. And if you forgot your PIN code, you can also, you will be logged out and you will be able to log in again, and we will ask you a new PIN code. So here, for example, I will enter the PIN code, and now I am able to access the application. So yes, that's about the new local protection we introduced on Element iOS.
Awesome. So is it in the release version already?
It's on TestFlight.
TestFlight. Okay, cool. And I didn't realize that it was or. I thought it was and. So you can do either Face ID or PIN. So that's good for people who forget their PIN, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome.
Bruno, are you there?
I think I saw your thing drop.
Oh no. Okay, well we have one more and then we can get back to him. I know he's been having a few laptop issues. Christian, you've been bumped up the order. Are you available?
Yes, one moment.
Oh, that was a long port call.
So, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. There has been a lot going on in the repository for bridges, where it's called matrix-appservice-bridge. It has been a library, or it is a library that has been around for quite a long time. and that we base all of our Slack and our C bridges on. And recently it has getting increased love to get migrated to TypeScript, which makes it a lot easier to get started with it. That has not been yet merged on develop, but rather I'm now asking for more input for those who develop a bridge to see if they can jump on the develop branch for this library and test out if their bridges are still working with that. We also have a ton of bug fixes that will be coming with this next major release. And what I really want to show off is the TypeScript additions that we now have, so that if you're typing something like this, you get auto completion for what can I do with my bridge. So I have get intent, get user store, all of these, and we'll also see what kind of parameters this requires and if these are optional or not, which makes it a lot easier to get started with a bridge, and also see if when the library updates, your bridge is still compatible with the API that this library offers. So I think it's a huge improvement, and will definitely make it easier to get more bridges out there, improve existing bridges and make them more reliable, especially because it's so important that bridges run reliable and that they don't crash when you have a lot of users communicating over them. That's already it. So the repository is matrix-appservice-bridge. If you need an example, there's a how-to markdown document that I'm also working on adding a couple more sections to and getting it up to date. Any input would be welcome.
I like it a lot. I didn't realize that you'd been working on this. This is actually super interesting documentation. We can.
It's mainly Halfshot and me who are doing this.
That's who works on it. So, all right, that's cool. I didn't realize that was there, so I want to take a look. I've just seen Bruno flash up on the screen. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool.
Should be good to go. All right. Yeah, I have a problem sharing my screen. I think I can only share one tab. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
Cool. Right. So here we have hydrogen. I can't show you the other side, but yeah, just half an hour before we started our call, I got into encryption to work on hydrogen after somewhat of a sprint for the last 2 weeks. So this is an end-to-end room. Hello world, I can type here and send. And then from Element Web, you're going to have to trust me that read it there. You can send messages back. Sorry, what? Oh, you can't see my tab. Actually, you couldn't decrypt it. I think... yes, this is because I still have to implement sending the room keys again when a new device is notified. And new devices and new members still have to send the room keys. But
it works with devices, so that's really something.
Yeah, for all existing devices. So the decryption happens on the fly. So when you scroll back here, I have received the room keys yet. So if I would create a new room from that other one, create room, secrets, and it's private, so E2 encrypted. And then I invite the other user to it. Then I accept it from Oh, yeah, I'm on the wrong account to accept this invite. Let me do this differently. Secrets. Right. Yeah. I would have to log in again. But yeah, when you're in a new room, it all just works. So there's a little bit of polish yet to do. Like I said, sharing the room keys on when needed, when the membership changes or the new device is notified, is signaled for the room. But otherwise, it's working. It's working well. I hope to release it somewhere next week. D2E enabled. Yeah.
Nice.
Real, thank you.
The PR is petrifying, Bruno, in terms of being quite comprehensive.
3,200 lines.
Yeah. It's very, very cool to see it come together. Congratulations on putting it there. Can't wait to play with it. But yeah, the devil is in the details of all the edge cases for going and resending the keys when new devices get added, etc. But congratulations.
Cheers.
Looks good.
Sorry, everybody, that we've run a bit late for those not watching on Matrix Live. We're about 20 minutes over schedule. So sorry, everybody, for eating into your evenings, particularly on mainland Europe.
Oops. Thank you to Kegan. Thank you to Steph. Thank you to Christian. And thank you to Bruno. Hope you enjoyed the demos. Send questions into the public rooms if you have them. Thanks, Matrix Live. Bye.
Bye.
All right, we'll edit there.